Yeah, I mean, that summits go overtime isn't that unusual. Cups usually go overtime, but usually only by a day. But things remain so unresolved here that it could go through the weekend. I'm hearing maybe even Monday. Meanwhile, you can see that they're dismantling the pavilions around them. So the pressure is really intense here. What they're disagreeing about and what's taking us into overtime is this issue of a loss and damage fund, sometimes called a climate reparations fund. So about 130 developing countries want a fund that establishes legal liability for developed rich countries to pay for the loss and damage caused by climate change because they were the ones that emitted the carbon over the past century. So for instance, you had those recent floods in Pakistan. Under the system, Pakistan would be able to ask developed countries for money to pay for the damage that they caused with their carbon emissions over the past century. Now, the developed countries, the US and the EU, have been opposed to this for a long time, but on Thursday night we got a major compromise offer from the EU where they said, okay, we will U-turn, we will support this fund on two conditions. One is that all the countries of the world have to agree to peak emissions by 2025. That is, their emissions could continue to grow for the next 3 years, but after 2025 they have to start declining. And the other is that they need a wide donor base for this fund. That means China. Unsurprisingly, China wants to be a recipient of this fund, not a payer into this fund, so they're opposed. And also the United States was not happy about this EU offer. I'm hearing they were blindsided by this EU U-turn and now feel a bit betrayed because the US is extremely opposed to anything that would establish legal liability for the emissions that they have caused. So what we're watching for right now is the US and China. They are the key ones that need to come around here to support this EU compromise that can get us over the line. So that dialogue between the US and China is going to be critical, and that's been complicated by the fact that John Kerry, the US climate envoy, tested positive for COVID last night, and he's now self-isolating. So he can no longer have those personal meetings with his Chinese counterpart, which started this week, a big breakthrough because those meetings weren't happening for a long time. So we'll see. It is not looking good here for a robust outcome.
So apart from the loss and damage fund, Dave, what are the other main sticking points there?
I think the audio cut out there, but I think you were asking about the remaining sticking points. Look, there's a lot of things that were unresolved from COP26 in Glasgow that weren't really touched here because loss and damage sucked all the oxygen out of the room. They need to add more detail to this coal phase down. They need to add more detail to funding for renewables, but instead they've been focused on this. And that has really frustrated a lot of developed country delegates because they say, look, there's already adaptation for dealing with the effects of climate change, adaptation funds. So this is doubling what already exists. But meanwhile, the developing countries say, no, we need a new kind of instrument that establishes legal liability. This is really important going forward. And this has become kind of an ideological divide, a shibboleth for a lot of countries. And that's frustrated people who say, look, we really needed to talk about the details here. And we wasted a lot of time over the past 2 weeks talking about this loss and damage issue, which is very much seen by a lot of people as a political issue. So a lot of those issues still unresolved that were supposed to be dealt with here in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Well, as those negotiations continue, Dave, you will be following events for us throughout the course of the day. That's our correspondent, Dave Keating, joining us live from Sharm el-Sheikh.